what do you think about that? The quest for psychological well-being. So we can identify with that, right? Psychological well-being sounds like a good thing. And it's like that we feel that we want to be responsible. We want to take care of it. We want to take care of our psychological well-being. And throughout history, people have had mentors. Mentors in different systems, a mentor, a rav, a friend, a good therapist. Okay, so there's, sometimes there can be emergency situations where drugs can be used as part of therapy. But I'm going to directly quote it. It's generally accepted that fundamentally changing the way the patient thinks is the most effective form of treatment in the long term. So this is like a sentence one can think about it. Changing the way the patient thinks is the most effective form of treatment in the long term. Now that doesn't sound too hard, does it? We just simply have to change the way we think, and then we'll be just fine. Okay, so of course we get a lot of instructions on this subject in Tanya when we're introduced to the Beinoni, because free choice is the Beinoni deciding whether to follow a thought or not. Since any thought can arise in the mind of the Beinoni, free choice boils down to, should I follow this thought or not? So what do we need to do in our quest for psychological well-being is changing the way we think. That's what we're working on, changing the way we think. There's no way to avoid it. It does take minute-to-minute meditation to know what I'm thinking, but there's just no way to avoid this step. This step is found it's been by both secular and frum and Hasidic and Kabbalistic therapy. It's been carefully analyzed, and changing the way the person thinks is the most effective form of treatment in the long term. And the long term reminds me of the Alter Rebbe speaking about the long way and the short way. And the short way is we have a hidden love and we simply have to let it burst forth. The long way, but that comes and goes. The long way is actually this working on ourselves, knowing what we're thinking, knowing whether to follow a thought. And then he mentions, it can help our mental health, proper breathing, hygiene, exercise, sleep, and relaxation. So those are all good things. But even sometimes after we get those things all lined up, we sometimes have psychological problems that we would like to have counseling for. We would like to have, because sometimes just even a good friend that we can be open with can change the way we look at things. Okay, so the next mini part is called Kabbalah and psychotherapy. But when we say Kabbalah, we're talking about how Kabbalah comes down through the Baal Shem Tov, the 18th century founder of the Hasidic movement. Because a lot of this book, again, for people who came in late, Transforming Darkness into Light by Yitzhak Ginsburg, a lot of this book is based on the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and Keser Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov's approach to improving our mental health. And the Rebbe spoke, Osei l'charav, make yourself a mentor. Everyone should have a mentor. Everyone should have someone they could talk to. It's essential. To be a chassid, one needs a mentor. One needs someone to talk about, to speak about honestly, about what we're working on, how we want to grow. That which reminds me of Leah Klein, those who know her. A Hasidic cheshbon hanefesh, a Hasidic accounting, self-accounting. One column is what I'm grateful for, and the other column is how I want to grow. Because how I want to grow is much more interesting than what's wrong with me. I mean, that's a little boring. But how I want to grow is kind of the flip side of that. We could see the advantage. And then, well, cheshbon hanefesh, it's good to make. But since this is a pretty quick one can really do it every day. How I want to grow and what I'm grateful for. Okay, so Osei l'charav, that we should have a mentor, we should have somebody to talk to. So there's one of the differences between secular and Hasidic psychotherapy is there's a different vision of what is psychological well-being and how to achieve it. So, this reminds me of this strange little story of what's the difference between secular psychotherapy. How does the Toras HaNefesh approach, Rav Ginsburg's approach to psychology, differ from secular psychology? So the example that's given is that the guy comes to his therapist and he says, I can't sleep at night because I'm cheating on my wife. And the therapist says, your problem is insomnia. I can help you with that. That's okay. So we understand we want to get the divine soul back into league with God. We have higher aspirations than insomnia, curing someone of their insomnia. Okay, self-knowledge. Okay, so knowledge of self, goes very far back in Western philosophy, Western psychology. There's the idea, know thyself. The Greeks had it 3,000 years ago. I think someone is not muted. I wonder if I can figure it out. Can everyone just make sure they're muted? Who is?
It's not muted.
Okay, Bruce, we're hoping that you can figure out how to, maybe, I don't know if I can figure it out. Okay, I think it's quiet now. Okay, great, because I know everyone wants to hear each little word. Okay, so know yourself. So we would say the Torah approach is know before whom you stand. Know before whom you stand. It's written by the Aron HaKodesh in many shuls. Know Hashem. So know Hashem is very different from knowing ourselves, it would seem, but the practical way to know God is to know the divine soul within ourselves. That's how we begin knowing God. In the second chapter of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe introduces our deeper out, because we've been identifying with our animal soul all these years, so much that I can't really see any difference between me and my animal soul. We're just one. And now we have a divine soul. The Alter Rebbe is telling us there's another identity, a deeper identity, and we have to move our identity to the divine soul. Like we can interview it. What do you think I should do in this situation? Ask our divine soul, because it's got it very clear, because we want to get very clear with the two sides and what their opinion is. Okay, so knowledge of God, not of ourselves, is meant to fill our consciousness. So this idea, there's an idea in Chassidus, I'm sure many people have heard of it, Hiskafia and Hishafcha. So Hiskafia was when I first became from, when I learned that Hiskafia was that you want to have 2 scoops of ice cream and you only have 1 scoop of ice cream. That's Hiskafia. But it never made sense, because it said when you do Hiskafia, Hashem fills all the universe more than in any other way. So I learned in Toras HaNefesh that what Hiskafia is moving the ego out of the center of our consciousness and putting Hashem, putting God in the center of our consciousness. That's Hiskafia. I mean, the ego is going to say, wait a minute, what do you mean you're not thinking about me? You're not preoccupied with me? Put me back in the center. So it does take effort. It takes meditation to put Hashem in the center of our consciousness, to think about God, that we're in God's presence. The ego doesn't like it. The ego doesn't like that idea, but it's something we can do. That's Hiskafia. Thinking about God is Hiskafia. I'm putting my self-preoccupation aside to think about God, to be aware of His presence. There's an idea also that we learned in Toras HaNefesh, that we tend to think of our individual existence, our ego, as the pashtus, the axiomatic truth. I exist. I mean, I exist. I exist in the morning. I exist in the afternoon. And Hashem is His chashus. Hashem is a novelty. Every now and then I remember Hashem. Yes, He comes up in my mind. I think of sure about is the Hishpashtus. So it turns out reality of people who are doing their Tanya Chitas now, we're learning a geras like Shar HaYichud B'Hamuna, the gate of unity and faith. And it speaks about how You know, that we have to see Hashem as the axiomatic truth, and we're the novelty. We're new on the scene. We haven't been here forever. We're not Ein Sof. So that's a very deep change in how we see reality. The Alter Rebbe is encouraging us to see reality totally differently. That Hashem is the axiomatic truth, and we're the hischadshus, we're the novelty. So this is a very radical idea, very radical idea. So to know God, we have to know ourselves. We have to perceive the godliness within ourselves, our divine soul. In other words, why it's in chapter 2 of Tanya is that nothing in Tanya makes sense without knowing about the divine soul. It's like essential, the divine dimension within ourselves. Now we all know the idea that Hashem wants a dira b'tachtonim. Hashem wants a dwelling place in the lowest possible world, which happens to be our world, because our world is so solid that somebody can go their whole life and not have a relationship with God. It's possible. God is so hidden in this world. And this is where Hashem has a taiva to have a dira b'tachtonim, has a lust. And when this is spoken about in Chassidus, like in Basi Lagani, it says you can't ask questions on a taiva. Like you don't say to somebody, why do you like strawberry ice cream and not pistachio ice cream? It's a taiva. You can't explain a taiva. So there's nothing in the realm of logic to explain why God wants a dwelling place in this lowest of all possible worlds, but he does. In this world where he's so concealed, he wants us to be, one, aware of his existence, which is a constant meditation. I wish there was a meter, that I had a meter that I could know how much of the day I'm aware of Hashem's existence, so I could work on it over time. Yes? And besides that, once we've gotten that down, that we're being aware that we're in Hashem's presence, he wants us to have a relationship with him. He wants a relationship with creatures just like us, made through a lot of symptom, where we feel our own identity, and we choose to have a relationship with him, because he could have, of course, made us lifelike robots that say, I love you, and we're pre-programmed to do everything that we need to be programmed to. But that's not a real relationship. We can all understand who wants a relationship with a wound-up robot. No, Hashem wants a relationship with people like us that feel our own existence, and yet we choose to have a relationship with him. Okay, so knowledge of God. So this is part of the story in Toras HaNefesh, in Hasidic therapy, reconnecting with God. We're identifying with the divine soul. Let's see if there's anything else. And then there's this idea of Hashem's omnipresence, that Hashem is with us no matter how far we've fallen. For those who were here for the first class and heard Nir speaking about Rachav, like she doubted, could she really do tshuva from where she had fallen? But this is the idea, it doesn't matter. We're never too far away to do tshuva. Quote from Tehillim, from David HaMelech, Tehillim 139, line 8, even if I descend to the depths, behold, you are there. Hashem is there wherever we find ourselves. We can connect to Hashem. We can be and feel his presence, and we can have a relationship with him. And one of the reasons we need to identify with the divine soul is that's the only way we can completely face the truth about ourselves, about our animal soul. If we're identifying with it, it's very hard to be completely honest. It's only when we step out of it into another identity. So now, those who are clutching the book, we're looking at chapter 2, which is called The Process of Spiritual Growth. And it introduces us to these three concepts that we'll be talking a lot more about in the coming weeks. And those are, I'll say the Hebrew first, Hachna'ah, Havdalah, Hamtakah. These are three terms taken from Keser Shem Tov, from the Baal Shem Tov's, the text of his writings, where he introduces this process of psychological growth, of spiritual growth. The first one, Hachna'ah, Hey Chaf Nun Ayin Hey, Hachna'ah, is sometimes translated as submission, but it's humbling the ego. I guess that is a kind of submission. It means making the ego smaller. Hachna'ah, making the ego smaller. It's the Tanya's chapter 30 of Tanya's, we should feel humble before every person, quoting Pirkei Avos. The Alter Rebbe even adds, even before the lowest of the low. And he explains how we can feel truly humble, not just act humble, but feel truly humble before the lowest of the low. We don't have time to go into that now, but this is the idea of Hachna'ah. It says submission is the humbling of the ego that is the basis of any honest appraisal of reality. Until we make the ego smaller, it will be sure to interpose its own interests. So rectifying the ego, I've had this discussed for 9 years being a student in Torah Sanefesh. We're just finishing the 9th year. And from the very beginning, the first subject is called rectifying the ego. Now, the ego doesn't like that name. The ego feels threatened. Like, maybe I don't want to be rectified. Maybe, do I really want to be rectified? And what's very funny about the class, though, after we've all taken the class, everyone wants to send their relatives to the class. Like people, when her daughter takes the class, she'll pay for her college education. People are quite desperate to have their relatives take rectifying the ego. But this is really the spiritual process of growth of the Baal Shem Tov. So the first, the 3 stages is Hachna'ah, which is submission, humbling the ego. The second, Havdalah, we know the word, Havdalah, separation. So this is to separate ourselves from our problem, to separate ourselves from our ego, to be able to separate from the problem and look at it objectively. That's why the idea of the divine soul, to be able to identify with the divine soul, we can step out of the animal soul and look at it objectively. We can't look at it objectively if we're identifying with it and we're protecting it. We have to be able to practice identifying with the divine soul. And then we can begin to sweeten, Hamtakah, the third of the 3 stages, Hamtakah, sweetening. We sweeten the problem. So what I always think of in terms of sweetening the problem is actually something that I learned from Y.Y. Jacobson when he was teaching Gemara Yuma 86, where it says that if we do tshuva out of fear of punishment, that's the lowest level of tshuva, then our intentional transgressions become like mistakes. Why? Because if I knew then what I know now, I never would have done it. So it was a mistake. I just didn't happen to know then what I know now. So if I do tshuva out of fear, my intentional sins become mistakes. But if we do tshuva out of love, then they're transformed into a catalyst for growth. So why define it as a transgression? Why define it as a mistake? Let's define it as a catalyst for growth. A catalyst for growth is a tremendous sweetening. It's a tremendous sweetening of the whole experience. And of course, we have to somehow I'm back. Okay. So we have to actually use it as a catalyst for growth in order for it to be one. In other words, if we become deeper people and if we become more compassionate people and if we become less judgmental people, then it really was a catalyst for growth. So this is one of the ideas of sweetening. Sometimes speaking about something helps sweeten it. So then the book speaks about this mixture of light and darkness. That's where confusion comes from. It's, that it became that there was this, we know that there was darkness and then Hashem created light, and each day has this darkness and light. So this process of separating out the light from the darkness can be very helpful to have a mentor. So, and the mentor is someone who, before answering a question, if we're in the position of being a mentor, it's like before giving someone advice, we need to daven to Hashem that he should give us the advice for this person. So this has this hachna'ah in it. I'm waiting. I'm not just saying the first thing that comes to my mind. Before giving someone the advice, I'm davening first that I should say the right thing. Hashem should put the right words in my mouth. All right, so this brings us to the third chapter, which is called Therapeutic Techniques. And the techniques are on the problem that we're working to solve. The first problem is anxiety. Anxiety. Can everyone identify with anxiety? It's funny, when I was first learning this, I wasn't sure exactly if I knew what anxiety was. And then punked right in the middle of my trying to figure out how to teach this, I'll tell you about my anxious moments. So I'll tell you the whole true story. So in the next community alone Shvut, I'd gone to my Feldenkrais class, and after the class, I somehow left my smartphone on the toilet paper roll in the bathroom, in the public bathroom, and I didn't realize this until I had gotten back to Bat Ayin, about 10 minutes away. And I suddenly came to the conclusion that I'd left my phone, my precious phone, in the public bathroom. This can happen to people who look at their phones while they're using the public bathroom. I don't recommend it. And I got back in the car and I noticed this was anxiety. I'm wondering what anxiety feels like. What would I do without my phone? I'd have to make all new friends. I wouldn't have their addresses. And my Waze has typed in all places I ever want to go, and I don't have to, and I can just, my whole life I was just like going through anxiety. What if it wasn't going to be there? And then I remembered, hachna'ah, making the ego smaller. It's the ego. Like, it's not. This is not like the worst problem the world has ever had. My ego made this big. I could make it smaller. And then I can step out of it. Like, it's all from Hashem. Hashem wanted me to go back. Whatever it is, if I have to meet someone, whatever it is, it's all from, this whole thing is from Hashem. And Hashem was so kind that my phone was waiting for me on the toilet paper roll there. It was very kind. I was very grateful. But I understood anxiety. Like this method is, we have an attack of anxiety this week, or this week and next week, everyone should be very happy that they'll have a chance to identify it. Yes, this is anxiety. And we're going to use this 3-part method. So let's speak about it. We're going to speak about it a lot more till it becomes very clear. Okay. Anxiety is the feeling of, I'm unable to cope. Like, how could I live without my phone? And it's also this anxiety between the animal soul and the divine soul. They have different wants all the time. It's a struggle. Which one should we listen to? What should we listen to? What should we do? Which reminds me of this, this joke. I'm not going to give any explanation. It's a story joke that I heard from Manis Friedman, that the Apikoros disciple goes to the Apikoros master and says, "Master, I'm afraid that maybe there really is a God in the world." And the master says, "My son, don't worry. In the morning, after you wash Nagelwasser, drink the water." Okay, you don't have to think it's funny. That's the end of the joke, the story, whatever. Don't cry, don't laugh. So we have these two voices, unless someone decides to numb out the divine soul, and that can cause anxiety. These two different voices giving us opinions. But to want to know, to begin with, what does the Torah say about the subject? And this, so what does the Torah say about the subject? Reminds me of an important class that I heard from Y.Y. Jacobson, based on a Sikha of the Rebbe that's in, I think it's in the Likutei Sichos, volume 10, Parshas Noach, where we all know the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, that we only see flaws in other people if we have the flaws in ourselves. That's how Hashem shows us what we have to work on. How else would we know? But Hashem shows us that flaw in other people. So that's how we know. So the Rebbe asks the question, but what about a tzaddik? Doesn't a tzaddik see reality accurately? How could he not be seeing the flaws in this person if they exist? So the Rebbe answers, you can see by how the person reacts. And the example that Y.Y. Jacobson gives is a guy comes home from shul and he tells his wife, this guy in shul is such a liar, he's such a big liar, he's always lying and he's very emotional. That means that the guy has the problem. Of course, another person could say, like this man appears to be lying. What does the Torah say I should do in this situation? What does the Torah say I should do when this situation comes up in my life? Like that's how, you know, it's the emotional reaction. If we speak about other people's faults with an emotional reaction, that means that's our problem. But if it's just what does the Torah say I should do in this situation, that's just seeing reality accurately. Okay, so anxiety. Okay, so again, these three approaches of Hachna'ah, Havdalah, Hamtakah is how we're going to look at anxiety. So the first approach is to deflate it, cut it down to size. In other words, it's coming from my ego. This feeling of anxiety is my ego. I can make it smaller. By making the ego smaller, the anxiety will become smaller. I mean, this is something that we really need to practice. It's really a worthwhile activity, because why be anxious when we can make the anxiety smaller? To note the anxiety, to realize it's a product of the ego, and then to make it smaller. Making it smaller doesn't mean I'm repressing it, I'm sweeping it under the rug. It means that I'm going to examine and resolve my problems in their proper context, speaking to a friend. In other words, this is something I do have to look at. But, you know, we spoke about last week when we were speaking about chapters 26 and 27 of Tanya, in terms of healing from reliving trauma. Yes, now it came back to me. That, like we spoke about Tuesday at 3, like if a memory of a sin comes up, if a sin comes up in our mind, the Alter Rebbe says, push it out of your mind with 2 hands. If we do it with 1 hand, we'll be welcoming it back with the other hand, but push it out of your mind with 2 hands, because any spontaneous memory of sin is just the Yetzer Hara trying to freak us out, depress us, throw us into taivas. Tuesday at 3. There is a time we need to look at things, but we have to choose the time. For the aspiring Beinoni, it's never spontaneous. What comes up spontaneously is the animal soul, which can exaggerate the problem's significance, etc., etc. So when we want to, so we're not repressing our problems, so we have to decide this isn't the right time. I have to have the ability to push it out of my mind until, if I can pick the right time, I'm not just getting out of it. Tuesday at 3, it's a nice quiet time to sit down and look at it, right? Right. So putting problems in the proper perspective, you know, so the relevance is not overstated. We have to make it smaller, to make our anxiety smaller. And how do we make it smaller? Again, is by making the ego smaller, deflating the ego. It, you know, and one of the ways, as we spoke about, is just moving the ego to the side and putting Hashem in the center. That already makes the ego smaller. And this is, of course, we want to be aware of Hashem's presence. We don't want to just be self-occupied. So I guess the only way to be aware of Hashem's presence is moving the ego to the side. Hiskafia. What this term Hiskafia refers to, the first 2 of the Baal Shem Tov's 3-step programs. Hachna'ah and Havdalah both are Hiskafia, making the ego smaller and stepping out of the problem. Hishafcha, turning it over, that's the sweetening. That's when what could have been defined as an avera, a transgression, what could have been defined as a mistake, can be redefined as a catalyst for growth. That's the hishafcha, that's the turning it over. So so the self-preoccupation, so here's, this is an important paragraph here in chapter 3. So egocentricity is manifest as self-preoccupation. Instead of feeling grateful to Hashem and to people that have helped us, we feel, the egocentric person feels everything they have is due to them. In other words, as kumpnir, this idea of es kommt mir, it's in Yiddish, it's coming to me, magili in Hebrew, entitlement in English. It means that it's totally self-defeating for the person who feels es kommt mir, it's coming to me. They're always going to be disappointed, and no one wants to give them anything, because who wants to give something to feel it's coming to them? You don't feel like you've given them anything because they think it's coming to them. So es kommt mir sabotages the person who's feeling it. And it's never, we learned this from Effie Ehrenberg, that it's never an accurate account. Like, in other words, when I make my accounts, here's my numbers, and es kommt mir, that's the bottom line. There's something dishonest in this accounting. No one else would come up with this accounting. He gave this example of a friend knows their friend went away for a month and they have a key to the apartment, and they decided to be more comfortable for them to stay in their friend's apartment for a month without asking. So they move in, and then the friend comes back, they walk in, and the guy says, oh, I just came over because I saw you left the light bulb on. I didn't want you to pay for extra electricity, so I came over to turn off your light bulb. And then the guy leaves, and he's thinking, they didn't even thank me for turning off the light bulb. How could they have not thanked me for turning off the light bulb? That's es kommt mir. The accounting, there's something wrong with that. We can see there's something wrong with that guy's accounting, but that's how es kommt mir always is. It's like somebody, it's making these accounts that are not accurate. So the opposite of es kommt mir is gratitude to Hashem. Gratitude is a much better feeling. It's a much better feeling to go through the day. That's why we start the day with Moda Ani Lefanecha, to start the day with gratitude, to cultivate a gratitude. We have to, Shemona Esrei, we bow with Modim. It's like trying to bring it to our attention, cultivating an attitude of gratitude. So again, we'll just sum up. So for anyone who came in late, Transforming Darkness into Light, Rav Yitzchak's book on psychology. It's Kabbalah and psychology. It's really also Hasidus and psychology. This is what we're going to be learning. We're in the middle of chapter 3. You could probably get your very own copy by ordering it from Galei Nai or Amazon. Or you can just listen to my reading. But we're going to continue next week learning from this book. And just to sum up, oh yes, I could say any questions because we're on Zoom. I might be able to figure it out. Let's see, does anyone want to ask a question? Any questions? And maybe put on your cameras so I can wave to all my friends. Don't be shy. Oh, look, people are appearing. Oh, I love it. Oh, this is great. Look at all these nice people. What a fun activity. People all over the world. Yes. So it's a Hamish group. Does anyone have any questions? Or you can think about the questions and ask me next week. But this is great seeing everybody. What a great group. I'm such a lucky girl. And so what are we going to practice? We're going to practice this week noting anxiety, noting it, and noting exactly what it tastes like, feels like, and noting, and then trying to making it smaller, stepping out from it, and seeing even if we can find a sweetening. Okay, that's the homework. Doesn't it sound exciting? Yes. So thank you all for coming, and Amir Hashem will continue.
Oh, Miriam?
Yes. Can you?
Question?
Yes.
The Hachna'a, Havdalah, Hamtaka, Havdalah that you're learning?
Yeah.
For 9 years now?
What? Yeah.
That's like the core of your learning, right? That's like the bottom line of all this learning that you're doing, the Havdalah, Hachna'a, Hamtaka, Havdalah?
Well, the Havdalah is in the middle. It takes a few years to get them in the right order. Right, yes.
So
that's the basis.
Like an al-regel achat kind of understanding of what, because you mentioned it in your teaching, and I know that Hachna'a you said was like related to smalling the ego.
Yeah.
And then the Havdalah is like separating between good and bad.
Just separating from the ego and identifying with the divine soul.
Uh-huh. And then the Hamtakah
is the sweetening of it, you know, that it can be a catalyst for growth. Whatever the situation is, it could be a catalyst. But we're going to speak about it in much more detail because as Rav Yitzhak teaches it, all three are included in each other, like the Hachna'ah has the Hachna'ah of Hachna'ah, and the Havdalah of Hachna'ah, and the Hamtakah of Hachna'ah. So get ready. We're really going to understand it deeply and how they're all intertwined. It's going to be very exciting.
Thank
you. All right. So this is just so much fun. Thanks to everybody for putting on their cameras and waving. It adds to the general joy, seeing my new friends and old friends.